Hello everyone, so this is my week 13 video on the Thomas Carrillo interview and the question of how fire service can benefit from intelligence sharing and active participation in JTTFs and the fusion centers. So starting off, I was going to talk a little bit about the interview. I like this point how kind of fire service needs its own intelligence and kind of intelligence gathering because of how they kind of view it and how the kind of like the threats and the risks and stuff that they analyze is kind of viewed through a different lens than what you would view it in as a law enforcement or the FBI or anything or military, anything like that. It's going to be a lot different than kind of how a fire service would view it and the kind of their prevention. And so even though while there might be extensive intelligence through military law enforcement and the like, that information might not be as effective, the kind of just in the raw form that it would be for them as it would might not be as effective for the fire service in that form because of kind of how they would apply it to their preparations and response. And then just kind of like just because they trying to focus on imagining like an attack in their jurisdiction, so they might have information on attacks happening somewhere else, but they kind of have to apply that information to kind of where they're located at and kind of the effect they would have and how they would respond to it, and kind of if they have that proper training, if they have the right PPE and the right like protocols to properly respond, effectively respond, and all the like. And then so that was just kind of like the one big point I had on the interview there. And then so going into kind of like the main question of the video. So while military and law enforcement intelligence might not directly relate to the fire service, they can still effectively use that information. I think they can put it to use, they can learn from it, they can kind of apply it to different scenarios and how they would respond. This, like for the JTTS, fire service input, I think is going to be just as valuable to them as like a law enforcement input or a military input, because they're involved in the communities and stuff like that just like anybody else is, any other department. And I think that kind of input can aid in preparation, and it can aid in training, kind of like because they're out there, they're seeing these things, they know what's going on as well. So that kind of input would be, I think, extremely helpful to the terrorism task force. And because, I mean, in the event of a terrorism incident, fire service is going to be in full response just like any other department. So I think without their participation in these the JTTFs, it's not only hindering the fire service response, but it's going to hinder, I mean, everyone else's response, because they're not going to be prepared, as effectively prepared to joint respond with fire service as they would be if without their participation. So I think that's kind of the big crucial part, because if they're trying to respond both at the same time, but they don't have any training together, they haven't learned from each other, there's going to be a lot to learn in a very short amount of time in a terrorism incident. And then I think that same kind of logic really applies to the fusion centers, because I mean, these intelligence information from fire service will be just as important and kind of have a big impact as it would from any other source. And because these fusion centers really service as kind of this large database for information that all kinds of departments, law enforcement, fire alike, can access from all over the country for a variety number of reasons. So I think without adding that information to these databases, so if like the Hamilton County Fire Department can't add their information to a fusion center, and that's kind of restricting maybe a department on the other side of the country, be like, look at that and be like, oh, hey, we can learn from that kind of thing. And I think that kind of really takes away a big piece of information that other departments can learn from. Just as like they mentioned in the interview, he says they learned a lot from the Paris response to their terrorism incident. And I think that's kind of a similar situation. So that's kind of like the big thing there. But that's all I have. Thanks.